said, are you ready? Oh, man, I really do want to get into WWE. Not like me personally, but like I want to be a fan.
Let's do our thing.
You introduce us.
Okay. Hello, and welcome to Okay But Listen,
a review podcast.
I'm Caitlin.
And I'm Juliana.
And this week we are doing Galaxy Quest from 1999.
Yeah.
I was gonna try to sing the theme song, but I can't remember it, and I feel like I would just do the Star Trek one.
It's really funny. I was going to try to sing the theme song, but the only song that came to my head was the Doctor Who intro.
That's probably horribly wrong.
Because it feels like a mashup between Star Trek, Doctor Who, the song,
yeah.
It's pretty much any sci-fi song.
Yeah.
Because it also has a little bit of a Star Wars vibe to it. Yeah.
It's so good.
It's
good. Such a good thing. I'm like frantically Googling who wrote the score. David Newman. Oh, here we go.
David Newman? He's written other stuff.
I think that's as much as we can legally play.
What else has he written?
I just closed the fucking tab.
You know I'm going to have a follow-up question.
Know. David Newman. Well, he did Brave Little Toaster.
Oh my god.
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Little Monsters.
Okay.
Mighty Ducks. Fucking
Mighty
Coneheads.
Ducks.
He did Coneheads. He did The Sandlot.
These are a lot of movies from my childhood.
Fucking Tommy Boy.
Tommy Boy.
I love that movie.
Me too.
It's the worst. But it's so good.
It's so good.
Fat man in a little coat. My favorite joke from that stupid movie. He did Ice Age.
Okay.
Oh, he did Death to Smoochie. Have you ever seen that one?
No.
Fantastic Robin Williams.
Oh.
It's him and the guy from Fight Club. And they're like kids show hosts. The one guy plays like...
I've heard of this.
We have to watch it.
Interesting.
So anyway, back to the movie that we're talking about.
Anyway, back to this.
We're doing Galaxy Quest. We've both seen this movie a billion times.
I haven't seen it in a really, really long time.
Yeah, I think it's been...
I don't think I've seen it since I've gotten out of high school.
Oh.
For sure.
I definitely saw it within the last, 6 years, I think.
So this is a movie. I'm going to do my hot takes.
Oh, wait, we'll do plot and then hot takes.
No.
So the plot, it starts with a bunch of washed up actors who were on one of the biggest sci-fi shows. It's very much a Trek ripoff. They're doing the convention circuit, and the main guy who played the captain runs into some real-life space aliens who need their help because they believe that the broadcasts of the TV show are what are they called?
Historical documents.
The historical documents. Mm-hmm. So they go to Earth to find the crew of the show, the crew of the ship from the show, bring them to real actual space to fight in a real actual alien thing.
Yep. It's so good.
And they do it. That's the best part is they end up they do save the day.
Yeah.
They do the thing.
They channel their characters and they do it.
But yeah, so we'll start with hot takes and thoughts.
Yeah, I don't recall when in my life this was, but I remember watching this movie a lot. I remember having it on DVD and just watching it all the time with my dad. I remember watching bonus features.
This is a very dad movie.
I'm pretty sure there was a commentary on the DVD that I used to watch.
I thought so hard about watching the commentary after we did it for Gentlemen Broncos. I might go back and do it sometime in the future just because it had been so long since I actually watched it. I didn't do the commentary.
I'll watch it with you. And I'm sure it will reawaken memories for me. Yeah. But this movie... It's one of those movies that, I really haven't watched in a long time, and I was like, oh, right, this shaped a large part of who I am. Last time you were talking about what kind of stuff you wrote when you were a kid.
Yeah.
This was the kind of stuff I was writing when I was a kid. Okay. Was whoopsies, you're actually in the made-up world that you figured out or whatever. I loved the concept of, actors thinking they were going on to set, or authors thinking they were dreaming and then ending up in their dreams. Like, I loved that idea so much.
Yeah, well, and this is one of those things where I was trying to find, like, an actual, like, name for the trope, and it's because I went on, like, tvtropes.com, and it's kind of a combination of what's called Adam Westing, where an actor just, like, becomes so synonymous with their character that that's just, like, what they do. Like, Adam West will just be Adam West and stuff. Yeah. And then it's a combination with the, like, actor role confusion, where it's like they confuse the actor for the actual thing.
Yes.
But yeah, no, so you would write stuff like this all the time?
I would.
That's so cute.
I loved it.
It's such a fun trope. So my mom really likes The Three Amigos, which is the same plot. And then My Name is Bruce is another one where Bruce Campbell, like, thinks he's going on set, but it turns out there's, like, an actual demon.
Oh, okay. So, again, I didn't have tons of movies in my life for a long time.
Yeah.
But, like, this was one I watched a lot of, and then later I remember also watching Truman Show. And those kind of close in my brain for some reason.
Okay.
I think it's because of the, like, actor being one. With those tropes you just said.
Yes.
That I can't now recall.
But no, I love this movie. I called dibs on doing the research for this one because I really just wanted an excuse to watch the documentary that came out in 2019, which is really good. I highly recommend watching it. I actually, like, got really emotional in a bunch of parts because the thing I really like, and I think part of why, this is kind of skipping ahead in my notes, but I think part of why this movie still stays around, because this came out in 1999.
Yeah.
But I think part of why this movie hit so hard and why it has such a lasting impact, like, it's one of the first movies that didn't treat fans and fanboys as, like, a joke.
Yeah, like, you see the con, and I was like, oh, that's a pretty accurate representation of I haven't actually been to a con.
We gotta go to one.
I've accidentally, let me rephrase. So my dad worked on the Presidio before he retired, which is now where the current Lucas Center stands. Yeah. So I've whoopsed into people in costume for whatever event is happening at the Lucas Center, mostly like stormtrooper kind of stuff. I've never intentionally paid money to go to a con.
Oh, man.
It's so fucking expensive.
It really is.
It's so expensive, and I feel like I'm just on the cusp of every nerddom where I'm like, I'm not willing to spend that much.
Yeah, the only reason I've been to SAC Anime twice is the first time it was when I was working at the bookstore, so I tabled, and I technically got paid to go.
Nice.
And then the second time, my friend's friend has, like, a lifetime pass. It was a thing they were doing for, like, COVID because they couldn't, like, do the con, so they were like, do you want to pay this much and you get a lifetime pass? So she would go all the time and she would keep her wristbands, and they only have so many colors of wristband that they cycle out, so she'll go and, like, look and see what color it is for that day and just grab the wristband. And so, like, that's how I got in last summer. Twitch was just like, oh, okay, it's an orange day, here you go.
Oh my god. I worked on K for a hot second, and I remember a con happening once.
Yeah. So I really love conventions because it's such concentrated nerd energy. And it's so fun, like, to go somewhere where everyone is just as much, if not more, of a freak about this thing as you. And, like, I just really love that. And this movie was really cool because it kind of predicted the rise of fandom, because, like, since the 90s, fan conventions have, like, exploded. Like, San Diego Comic-Con is, like, a mainstream thing.
Yeah.
Like, even people who are, like, quote-unquote normies, they've heard of San Diego Comic-Con. Well, like, they know, like, what a Comic-Con is.
They have so many panels, too, for, like, movies that the general public cares about.
Yeah. It also, kind of towards the end, because they had this, like, what people thought was a publicity stunt where, like, the real ship crashes into the convention, you see at the very end that they rebooted the show.
Yeah.
And so you kind of see an instance of fandom banding together to get something renewed, and we've had that like
so many times,
which is really cool.
I remember that being a thing that people wanted, like when Firefly got canceled.
Yeah.
And the absolute push and movement for that to come back.
Yeah.
And the denial was always so heartbreaking.
I know.
But then now it seems like fandoms hold such a stronger voice because I feel like big companies do realize that they're like money bags.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, if you cry enough.
Cry, baby, cry.
Wasn't really a thing in the 90s and early aughts.
Yeah. It's also with the rise of the internet,
yeah.
I feel like, and having fandom spaces online has really helped connect it. Because, I mean, I think it's funny, too, that it's, like, I'm not 100% boned up on my fandom history, but I love that it's, like, a Star Trek show. It's like a
Trekkies.
Yeah, because that was the original fandom. That was the OG. That's where like fan fiction really became a thing. You had like people mailing like homemade zines to each other, and like people were dressing up in costumes, and like that's really, I really love that this is like kind of, it's a love letter to Star Trek and fandom in general, but like Star Trek really is like the OG.
The standout.
Which is so funny because I've like maybe seen 3 episodes of Star Trek, and I've watched the movies.
Oh, so I've seen a lot of the episodes and I haven't really watched the movies.
I know I watched Wrath of Khan and the one with the whales. And then the J.J. Abrams one.
Yeah, and then the J.J. Abrams
because Chris Pine is so beautiful.
Oh, yeah. That works.
I think one of the things, this is veering into Caitlin's Old Man Yells at Cloud. I should just say Caitlin Yells at Cloud at this point. Mm-hmm. But this is veering into that where you really could not make a movie today where nerds are the outcasts.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like this kind of, Galaxy Quest kind of marks the end of nerds being the butt of the joke. And fandom being seen as, like, I don't know what I'm trying to say there. But, like, I've yelled about this in your general vicinity many times. Where, like, there's a specific kind of, like, Marvel or, like, Star Wars kind of fan where they're, like, holding on to the idea of, like, they're an outcast and on the edge of society because they still read comic books and they like Star Wars. And it's like, my guy, Marvel is one of the highest grossing franchises in the last 15 years.
I would like legit argue that almost the opposite has kind of started to happen, where people who genuinely care about comic books are envied because there's so many summaries and breakdowns. So like that way you don't have to actually get the comic books and read them. You can just go online and for free read the plots of stuff.
Yeah.
Or like, honestly, people who play D&D, a lot of people want to play D&D, but they don't want to do any of the legwork to learn it.
Yeah.
That's something that I feel like I've been seeing more of in my life. And that with nerddom, like a lot of like quote unquote normies want to do nerdy stuff, but they don't want to do the legwork to be nerds.
Yeah.
And I feel like with all these box office hits, they get to claim this fandom that they only kind of half worked for.
That's fair.
So like it is interesting that there is a broader spectrum of nerd now because it is mainstream.
Yeah.
And I don't think nerds are being made fun of as they were in the 80s and 70s and 60s. Like,
I mean, something that's crazy that I've noticed in the last, like, 10 years or so is, do you remember when, like, you could go to Spirit Halloween and buy a nerd costume?
Yeah.
I haven't seen a nerd costume in at least, like, the last 6 years or so. Like, it's not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
Like, the Poindexter character isn't really played for laughs as much.
Right. Well, I think part of that is a lot of the people who are writing it, writing those stories, were people who were bullied.
Yeah.
We've talked about this, where, like, a lot of people who make media, you can tell were bullied. Like, I honestly think the best example is Star Kid. Because those guys openly talk about Matthew Lang, I think is the guy's name. He and his brother, whose name is also escaping me, they write the musicals together, and they have openly talked about being bullied and using that in what they make. And when they create nerdy characters, they feel like whole characters. Like, there's more, it's not just like, they're a nerd. Like, I don't know, it brings more layers to it.
Yeah.
And that's really the most earnest depiction I've seen of nerds recently. Was, like, literally Nerdy Prudes Must Die, and that's been the most, like, genuine depiction of nerddom I've seen in a long time.
Well, and I think it's funny, I think it's kind of telling that if you want the nerd to be, like, the bullied kid, you can't really do that in, like, modern, like, contemporary settings. It's like Stranger Things or, like, like the nostalgia pieces where the kids are in the 80s, because that's when, like, kids were bullied for liking Dungeons and Dragons or comic books. And I think it's so funny that if you had, like, a character now where people are like, he just reads comic books, it would be like, okay.
And
we've had to circle back to, like, just we bully kids because they're gay. Like, that's still available for us.
God. And that also kind of reminds me of, like, Dimension 20, the first season of Fantasy High. Mm-hmm. They introduced the AV Club, and the AV Club's like, yeah, people bully us because we're nerds. And I fucking love Ada, and she's like, no, people bully you because you're rude to them. She's like, you think you're better than everyone because you like to read, and that's why people are mean to you, not because you're inherently smart or something.
And that's the fucking thing. So I am very glad I have a Star Wars tattoo, and I'm very glad that it's small and, like, people don't see it outright. Mm-hmm. Because, like, I was in college, and I, like, had my Star Wars backpack, and I, like, have my... I don't think I had the tattoo at that. I did have the tattoo. But this fucking guy, he was a film student, so that's already a point against him. Mm-hmm. He goes like, oh, the rebellion, huh? Like, how many innocent people do you think were on the Death Star? And I was like, I hate you. I'm about to attack you like a chimp. I'm going to go on the other side of the room to avoid violence against you.
I guess I think that...
Because there's a specific... They have to be, like, reply guys, or they have to be, like, antagonists, because... Yeah. But then they turn around and they're like, why don't women want to fuck me? And it's like, because you kind of suck. It's not because you don't like comic books. It's because you kind of suck.
You genuinely are a bad person.
You genuinely are unpleasant to be around.
Yeah. I had a friend in law school. I knew her for like a year and a half before I went into her apartment. Mm-hmm. And I went into her apartment, and she has posters of Star Wars. All this Star Wars, like, her glassware was all Star Wars. Mm-hmm. She had a ton of Star Wars stuff, and I had never heard her talk about Star Wars before. And I was like, whoa, I didn't know you were such a big fan. She's like, oh yeah, I rewatch the series regularly. Like, it was, whenever I went over to her place, it was always on in the background. Mm-hmm. I was like, why don't you talk about it? She's like, because men challenge me on it.
The worst part
She's like, I'd rather pretend to not know anything than say I like something.
The worst part of being a Star Wars fan is other Star Wars fans. Like,
she said one time she went on a date, and this guy, she, like, mentioned she liked Star Wars, and the guy's like, yeah? Well, how many screws are there in the Millennium Falcon? Oh my God. And she was like, okay.
I think that's so funny to bring it back to Galaxy Quest after this long tangent. So, like, that's part of the charm is Brandon, the, like, nerd character, the nerd stand-in. Mm-hmm. He's one of those guys, but it comes from, like, such a sense of innocence and just genuine love for the show. He's not trying to one-up someone. And so I love that moment in the convention in the beginning where he, like, goes up and he's like, we have some questions about, like, obviously with this capacity of the whatever and, like, these characters, and clearly we all know blah blah, and he's asking these, like, deeply technical questions, and they're actors, they don't fucking know. Like, one of my favorite bits, again with Star Wars, one of my favorite interviews is this one with John Boyega, where the interviewer is like, so I'm not really supposed to ask any questions about, like, the movies or whatever, and John Boyega's like, oh no, that's fine, like, you can ask a couple questions, and the guy goes, okay, good, pulls out this list, and he's like, so in this part of this one of the movies, we have this scene with this thing, and John Boyega's face, he's just like, what the fuck, he looks so unprepared.
I will say, like, something about the movie that I think is really fun about the actors. It's like, because this is their life, they do seem to have a really deep knowledge of their fan base and of the show. Like, they're able to be like, this episode, this season, and know what lore is being talked about. And I think it's true with, like, Brandon and his friends, they just are really passionate people who got to go to a con where they knew everyone was going to understand what they were saying. Like, even at the end when he's explaining to his mom what's happening, he's like, you know, it's clearly unstable. And you can tell he's, like, probably explained this to her 1,000 times. But it's also that thing of, like, it seems like she doesn't really care.
Yeah.
But...
well, and she's still kind of, like, it's funny because she just still, like, she understands that that's what he's passionate about, because he's got his arms full of the fucking Roman candles. He's like, so we gotta do this, and clearly blah blah blah, and she just looks at him and she's like, okay, be home before dinner.
Yeah.
The dad looks at her and she's like, well, he's going outside.
I really like that group of friends.
Yeah.
I really like that group of friends partially because there's a girl in it.
Yeah.
Which is, like, fun to see in a nerdy space.
Well, and you get the, like, early internet, too, where, like, they all have their computers and their little headsets, and they're, like, they have the
models.
the models and, like, the computer, like, breakdowns of the ship. Like,
yeah, well, he even has the ship schematics on his wall.
Yeah.
Which is, like, really kind of cool to see.
It's so cute.
And I love he's doing models. Oh, my God.
Because I watched the documentary. People have so much to say about this movie, and, like, all of the people who worked on the movie... they fucking loved this movie, and they loved Star Trek, and they were huge geeks, and, like, you can feel that.
Yeah.
But, like, one of the best parts that you have to talk about, and they have, like, a whole section of the documentary dedicated to just talking about the Thermians, the aliens.
Yeah.
Because they make the movie almost.
Oh.
They're so funny, and they're so weird. And they're
I love
just
them so much.
fantastic. And
yeah.
so, like, one of my favorite things, Enrico Colantoni was the guy who played Mathazar, the, like, leader.
Mm-hmm.
He made the Thermians. He came up with the weird way they talk. He came up with how they walk. He, like, was the main guy. Him and, like, the other, like, 3, like, main aliens. Every day they would have extras come in or whatever, and every shooting day they would start with, they called it Alien School. So they would bring them in and they would show the extras, like, how to walk, how to do the, like, talking. And he said that the way they talk is based on, like, he sounds so funny because he's, like, a good actor, and he just, like, he knows his craft, and you don't really think about it because it's, like, silly aliens.
Yeah.
But he was like, yeah, I based the way they talk on this vocal exercise I learned at Yale when I was at Yale.
You're like, all right.
And it's, like, a vocal exercise where you use all 7 of the vocal points, so, like, from the diaphragm, the throat, the, like, whatever.
Oh,
and
that's
so
hard.
Yeah, and it's the way that you modulate it through the thing.
Oh.
And it just gave off heavy, like, I love him talking about how he learned it at Vale. It gave off very much that behind the scenes of Alan Tudyk doing the chicken noises for Moana, and he's just like, I went to Juilliard.
Yeah.
The director, like, they would have the extras or, like, the other aliens, and he would just point at Enrico and just be like, do what he's doing. And they would just lose their shit. They were always having so much fun. They would always make the other actors, like, bust up. And so he has a quote where he was like, we would always ask, like, are we having too much fun?
Oh.
And so, like,
I love that, though. Like, that scene where they were rolling the beryllium sphere through the desert, I was like, that's gotta have been a really fun time. Like, the actors seem like they're trying not to laugh while trying to fight. And...
so that's the only scene that they actually shot on location.
Where is that?
It's Utah in Goblin Valley.
What a great fucking name.
Right? I have a picture of me posed in front of the Goblin Valley
sign
sign because it was on our way back from, like, a Lake Powell road trip. And so, a fun fact about that, the production company had to pay fees to be able to film there to get, like, the licenses or whatever. And at the time, there was only one dirt road to get into the main part of the park. The company paid so many fees that state was able to use that to pave the road. They had enough money to, like, pave it with asphalt.
Oh, nice. Dang.
And, like...
does that road sign, does it have a little sign that says, thank you to Galaxy Quest Production?
I know, that would be so funny. Do you want to get into research? Or do you have any more hot takes?
Sure.
What are your notes? Go over your notes.
My notes, I like how it is very character driven. Like, each of the characters have their own kind of arc, and it does kind of coincide with what their character does.
Yeah.
I very, like, distinctly remember Gwen's character and, like, all of Gwen's character scenes. I, like, really were, like, burned in my memory, and I think it was the first time, I think for me, because I watched it pretty young, that was the first time I'd seen sexism called out so blatantly in a film, and being like, you know, it's played for laughs, but being like, oh, yeah.
Well, and it's so funny. She's wearing fake boobs in that movie.
Yeah.
And it never really clicked for me because you're like, oh, well, yeah, she's playing the, like, girl character on the spaceship. She's got to have the low-cut tops and, like, her big boobs. Mm-hmm. And then I rewatched Alien the other day, and I was like, she ain't got no boobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, yeah, they call out the sexism because they have that bit where she's talking about, they're in the dressing room at the convention, and she's like, at least they ask you real questions for your magazine entry. My entire article was talking about how my boobs fit into my top.
Yeah.
Like, they call out that sexism.
And, like, she's a lieutenant, but her only job is to talk to the computer.
I have one job on this ship. It's stupid, but I'm going to do it.
I love it so much. I thought Alan Rickman's character's growth, too, was really interesting. Because he kind of has this hatred for the fans, and by the end he has, like, found his love for the fans again.
With Quellic. R.I.P. King.
Yeah. Oh.
But yeah, no, totally. He has, like, I feel like he kind of has the same arc as, like, Leonard Nimoy sort of had, because he's got the prosthetic, he's the science guy, he's kind of the Spock stand-in.
Yeah.
Where Leonard Nimoy, he has, like, 2 memoirs that he put out, and the one was, like, I am not Spock, and then, like, 10 years later it was, like, I am Spock. And I feel like it's that thing, the actor role confusion, where everyone is like, this is your thing, and he's like, I was an actor, I did King Lear. Yeah. And he has that, like, anger towards this role because it's stuck to him this long.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you have Tim Allen, and he's like, he lives for this. Like, his character, he's like, this is what I've got. This is my thing. This was my big high moment. Well, I'm also going to hold on to it.
He does love the fans, but he's also so disrespectful to them. Mm-hmm. Like, everybody else is there on time, and he's an hour and a half late, and is like, let's fucking get the show going, and you're like, this is so disrespectful. Yeah. And the line he says is so rude, where he's like, well, what else are they gonna do, sit in their basements? Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh my god, like, he's just there for the praise and doesn't see them as people. He's rude to the kid.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much there, and by the end of it, he needs their help to land the ship and to know how to do stuff, and actually reaches out to the fandom and reconnects with them.
Yeah.
But he, like, was really, it was a really interesting thing for me watching the beginning of the movie, where I was like, oh right, he has this really deep knowledge of his work, but kind of this outright disrespect for the fans.
Yeah, it comes from, he has the knowledge of the show and the episodes and, like, the plot lines, but it's not because he cares about it, it's because it's like, that's his legacy. Like, he's flipping channels on the TV, and he stops on one of the episodes and is, like, quoting along with it. So it's very much like, he's the guy where this is what he has. I think one of the things that makes this movie is the characters. Like, they are fully fleshed out, they have their motivations, and they, like, represent different aspects of, like, the Star Trek characters, but also, like, the actors, and you get, like, the different attitudes toward it. You have the guy who, that's his whole life. You have the guy who, regrets almost. He's, like, doesn't want that to be his whole life. You've got, I feel like, Gwen and Tommy see it as, like, it's their claim to fame, but they're, like, more normal about it. They're like, this is a job.
Yeah.
Like, we're gonna do these shitty store openings, and we're gonna do these conventions because it pays the bills.
Yeah, and even for Gwen, she is the one who talks the most about fan respect.
Yeah.
So, like, she gets that. For them, it's a job, but for fans, they're making their life, you know?
Yeah. And so she does have that respect, because she's the one who feels the worst about the Thermians thinking it's real. She's the one who keeps being like, we have to tell them that this is fake.
Yeah.
This is, like, unethical what we're doing here.
Right.
I could just go on forever about these characters. I'm gonna go into my research a little bit.
Go for it.
So the main guy who got this movie made was the producer, Mark Johnson. He was like the guy. This was his baby. He's done a lot of other like TV and film too. He produced, let's see, Good Morning Vietnam.
Oh.
Rain Man.
Okay.
He did The Notebook, How to Eat Fried Worms. Like,
oh my god.
He's a producer. So like, with producers, they're not as involved usually.
Right.
So they can just have like wild like filmography. The original script was a spec script written by a guy named David Howard, and it was called Captain Starshine.
Oh.
And so it was just kind of the plot was about what if the aliens were real kind of thing. He didn't really like the script. Mark Johnson didn't really like the script, but he liked the concept of the aliens who think that the TV shows are real. Mm-hmm. So he picked Bob Gordon, who was the initial writer. He turned it down, but ended up taking it on because Mark Johnson was like, you're gonna fucking make this movie. Basically, he's like, you're gonna fucking do it. He didn't read the spec script until after the movie was done. He instead just kind of started with the base concept of like washed up actors from a Star Trek style show running into real aliens.
I think that's probably good. I think sometimes it's good not to read, to run with the concept.
Yeah.
Because sometimes ideas can get stuck.
So one of the big things about Bob Gordon and his final script is in Captain Starshine, the character of the actor / captain, that character hated being the captain. And that was like his motivation. But Bob Gordon changed it to the idea of the actor loving being the captain and making that like the defining role that he held on to. Yeah. And I feel like that's such a big part of what makes this movie and what makes that character's arc make sense is he goes from like, this is my entire life to, wow, I can do this. He gets a better appreciation for it.
Yeah, I love that line where they walk into the barracks and Alan Rickman's character is like putting gasoline on a fire. But also it's so important to have that character. I guess my question I would have for the Captain Starshine script is, was it just one actor or was it a crew?
So it was like a bunch of actors. From what I can find, it's hard to like actually find a lot about the script, but at one point the Alan Rickman character was going to be like a villain. He was going to be the main antagonist, and it was really different.
Yeah, because I could see this kind of falling prey. Like, I could see an original version of this having way less crew members and trying to get that conflict in a different way. When they first get on the ship and where you have, like, the captain being like, we gotta fucking do this, and the other characters being like, we probably shouldn't for two different reasons. Yeah. I think that, like, lends a lot to it.
Yeah, I
where
agree.
You get to have what would, I think, in a real world situation, be like an internal conflict, be seen outwardly.
I like that. The two hardest parts of making this movie were casting, which I'll get into in a minute, but also directing, because a little bit of background context. This movie was made by DreamWorks. This part of the late 90s, DreamWorks is just getting started. It was, I don't know how much you know about, like, the clashing between DreamWorks and, like, Pixar and Disney.
Vaguely.
Yeah. That drama is happening. DreamWorks is getting out. They're trying to get their legs under them. They need a hit. They want a hit, but they don't really know what they need.
Yeah.
So, they originally actually hired Harold Ramis to direct, because he was a well-known director. He had stuff under his belt.
What else has he directed?
He did Ghostbusters.
Oh, that could be fun. I could see why you would want that person.
I don't know if he directed Ghostbusters, but he's like the guy.
That means nothing to me. I don't know people's names.
That's fair.
I only know the work sometimes.
Harold Ramis, like, he directed Caddyshack, National Lampoon's Vacation, Groundhog Day,
I could see why you would want him for this movie.
Yeah.
Because it does have those kind of vibes.
Yeah.
The, like, off-the-wall comedy, fast-paced.
Yeah, and he had, like, the experience, and DreamWorks was like, we want that. Mark Johnson, the producer, he originally wanted Dean Parasot because he knew him, he believed in his skills, and DreamWorks was like, nah, we want Harold Ramis, he knows what he's doing. But there was, like, kind of contention because Harold Ramis, his vision for the movie was, like, drier, it had a different kind of vibe, and he finally dropped out because he had to kind of come to the conclusion of, like, my voice isn't correct for what you want this to be. I'm not the correct person for this.
I can also see that.
Yeah.
As a response.
So they ended up hiring Dean Parasot, who was a really good director. He was open to feedback and opinions. He was willing to let actors kind of feel out the scenes a little bit more. He made it a really welcome environment. Like, he just like I was saying with the Thermians, he let those guys just kind of come up with the entire concept for those characters. He's like, just do what he's doing. Don't worry about it. Like,
I love it.
He made it a really welcome environment.
We love a director that creates a collaborative environment.
Yeah. And all the directors really, or all of the actors really appreciated it. But yeah, so the hardest part of making this movie was casting. They went through so many options for each character. They really did not know what to do. But the hardest one was Jason Nesmith / Captain Peter Quincy Taggart. When he was on board, Harold Ramis wanted, like, Kevin Kline. A bunch of other alternates. They wanted, like, Bruce Willis, Tim Robbins, Mel Gibson, Alec Baldwin.
Whoa.
Like, they had all of these really weird...
They knew they wanted a distinguished person.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I really liked, that I can't remember if it was the director or the producer, one of them, the studio kept trying to throw action actors like into the role, and they were like, no, we need someone who's a comedian. Like, we need someone who can be an action star but has a base in comedy. And so that was kind of their driving
that makes sense for, like, Star Trek, too.
Yeah.
None of those people are, like, particularly good action actors.
Yeah, exactly. But... And so they ended up with Tim Allen, and he actually really wanted this role because he could really relate to it. Because at this time, his TV show had just ended.
And what TV show was that, Caitlin? What TV show was that?
Home Improvement.
And what was his show on Home Improvement?
Tim the Toolman.
See, you know things. I can't believe you didn't know who fucking Tim Allen was.
I know who Tim Allen is. I didn't know Tim the Toolman. I looked it up because I knew you'd fucking bring this up and yell at me. But anyway, Tim Allen related to this character because his TV show had just ended, and at the time, his biggest movie credit was Santa Claus.
Oh, yeah.
So he was like, he really related to Jason Nesmith because he was like, yeah, my biggest thing that I'm known for right now is a TV show that doesn't exist anymore, that just ended.
Yeah.
It wasn't as exciting finding the rest of the cast. Once they got Tim Allen, it was a lot easier to, like, find people. One of the things I really like is Sigourney Weaver getting cast because she had just done Alien.
Oh.
And so they were like, she's a sci-fi actor, but it's like the complete opposite of Ripley in Alien.
Yep.
And so, yeah, they've got Sigourney Weaver as Gwen, Alan Rickman, fucking fantastic. I love Tony Shalhoub's character because he's the tech sergeant.
Oh my god.
His character is so funny to me because he is stoned off his ass the entire time, and he's always eating. Like, he's late to get into the transport pods up to the ship because he's got, like, a to-go bag of his food. Like, he went and got lunch,
and he's just walking around with that brown bag. It's so funny.
And then him, like, having his romance with, what is her name? Like, Leilani?
Yeah.
Just, that scene is one of my favorites where they start making out and her, like, tentacles come up and he's got, like, that. He's like, yes. And goes back in. And Sam Rockwell off to the side, like, oh, that's not right.
Fucking Guy. I love him.
I'm obsessed with Guy. Sam Rockwell, we stand, like, we love Sam Rockwell at this podcast, in this house.
Yes.
But he is so funny as his character. He's Guy Fleegman.
I fucking love Guy.
And he's so funny because he kind of has the same attitude about the show as Jason, where this is, like, his whole thing, but it's sadder because he played the crewman that died in one episode, but he's like, I was on this show. He's the guy, he's like their handler. Like, he's the guy who books them the gigs at a lot of the, like, the store opening and the convention.
What is up? You're fine.
He's like, this is his life, and he, like, this is his job. The fact that they, like, he pulls up his own chair to the signing table with his headshots that he already has, where he's like, yeah, let me get in here.
Yeah. He's so funny. I love his line of, I'm the guy who dies so you know the situation's serious. Like, I love how self-aware this movie is about all the tropes it has.
Well, and he's genre aware too.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I really like, is that actors know the show, but he's closer to the fans. When they're on the alien planet getting the beryllium sphere, they're like, oh, the cute aliens. He's like, they're cute now, but something's going to happen. They're going to turn ugly, and it's going to be really bad. And that's what happens because he knows this stuff. He knows the tropes. He knows the way that the episodes play out.
Right.
He's also got, like, I think the best quotes in the whole movie, like, when they're on the planet and the door opens, he's like, you don't know if is there air?
Yeah.
You don't know. And he's so good. I love also on the alien planet, Sigourney Weaver, she's like, let's get out of here before one of those things kills Guy.
Yeah. I do love that. Good. I also love that it's Sigourney Weaver and it's on the heels of Alien, because, like we were saying, Gwen's role is, like, hypersexualized to fit the, like, trope.
Yeah.
But Alien was written for a male or female actor to play, which is, like, the truly exact opposite of this.
Yeah.
So, like, how women were viewed in space versus, like, it's just kind of cool to see those two things happen so close in time together.
Yeah. Well, and I love, so with Sam Rockwell and, like, another Alien kind of parallel. So Sam Rockwell based a lot of Guy's mannerisms on Bill Paxton and Aliens.
Oh.
Because the quote, you say aliens and Bill Paxton, the first thing anyone says is, game over, man, game over. Because he's the guy, as soon as stuff starts getting bad, he's like, fuck this, we gotta get out.
I love that. There's one moment in this movie that was so funny, and it's a throw up, but it's when Guy's, like, having his panic about having to get into the room with all the bad aliens, and he has his gun, and he's like, I'm gonna martyr myself or whatever. And you see him try to pick up the gun, and it's too heavy for him. He sways, and they have to, like, hold him back. Oh my god, I thought that was so, just, like, a good little comical touch.
Well, and here's a Caitlin fun fact, something I hadn't noticed until I saw someone on, like, YouTube or something pointed out, is he's the character who dies first, but in that scene where Sarah sneaks onto the bridge and, like, shoots and kills everyone, he's the only person that doesn't get shot and killed.
I saw he was hiding.
Yeah.
He's, like, under the, like, little control.
He knows.
Yeah, he's aware.
This was also, so they have a lot of really fun casting. They've got Daryl Mitchell as Tommy, and they have Corbin Bleu as his younger
counterpart. My god, the guy from High School Musical? Get out of here.
And his character is really fascinating too, because it's almost sadder that this is his whole thing, because he was a kid when the show was on. Yeah. He's very much like the kid actor who is now older, and, like, this is the thing that follows him around. What I loved was that Will Wheaton was a big part of the documentary, and that's his thing, is he was the kid on the spaceship in Star Trek, and now he's, like, an adult, and he's like, I was in Star Trek, and people were like, you were a kid, why was there a kid on a starship?
You're like, don't worry about it. I did love that all of the characters that had big ship interactions, because it seems like the Star Trek-y-esque show went on for a long time.
Yeah.
So they did all have their systems in place of how they did things, and all of them trying to remember what their old systems used to be. I thought was so funny.
His whole job when they're, like, fighting the aliens, they're like, go practice driving. And
Yeah.
so you see him like watching the old tapes and like using his hands and like remembering how like his hand motions, and he's like, okay, I had a system like this.
Yeah, I love that.
And then you've got, this was actually, here's a little fun fact, this was the film debut for Rainn Wilson.
Oh.
This was his film debut, was as like one of the Thermians.
That's so funny, really.
Yeah.
Huh.
Isn't that weird?
How old was he?
I don't.
That's Dwight, right?
Yeah, that's Dwight.
Yeah. Yeah, it started and I went, is that fucking Dwight?
Well, and it's so funny because I have never watched The Office. My touchstone for Rainn Wilson is this movie Rockstar. Or no.
Oh, yeah.
The Rocker.
Yeah.
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 That's my touchstone.
That's a good one.
The Naked Drummer. So, anyway, back to research. So, DreamWorks needed a hit. They had just released the Rugrats movie.
Oh, okay.
Like, a little bit around, like, a year, I think, before Galaxy Quest was going to come out.
So my brother and I were not allowed to watch Rugrats.
It's kind of scary.
No, we weren't. We wanted to watch it. We weren't allowed to watch it in the house.
Oh.
And my mom told us it was because the Rugrats were disrespectful to adults.
Okay.
And then we brought it up recently in our lives, and my mom was like, oh, I just hated the voices on that show. And it's like, cool, I missed out on a cultural phenomenon.
That's like how parents hate Caillou because he's annoying.
Yeah.
He's also not a good kid. He is the one who's disrespectful to parents.
Well, that just became a thing in my house if my mom didn't like a show. Like, looking back, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Because she was like, I work with elder adults, and I am an adult, and this show's being disrespectful to adults, and you really should learn to respect adults. And looking back, I'm like, she just found the show annoying. She just found the show annoying. Ugh.
I love
Anyway, so that's why I wasn't allowed to watch Rugrats, and it's not like a thing that deeply hurts anymore, but whatever. I just missed out on so much because it was such a thing. It was such a thing in the 90s.
Meanwhile,
Everyone had Rugrats stuff.
I had the Rugrats movie on the orange VHS tape.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
It was cool to have it and to have the shirt and to have all the fucking little toys. And everyone would talk about it at school, and I just had to be like, meh. My mom doesn't let me watch that show.
We're not bitter.
Not bitter at all.
So DreamWorks, Rugrats had just come out and it did pretty well, and DreamWorks, very specifically, they wanted like the 8 to 12 audience. So they were like, great, you can make this movie, but it has to be PG. And everyone was like, that's not the movie that we shot.
Yeah.
So they had to cut a whole bunch of scenes. They had to add scenes to provide continuity so that certain things for younger audiences, because kids are stupid and can't connect dots.
Yeah.
Like the scene where the limo gets beamed up, they had to add that because it was like they had to connect scenes. There's the one that everyone talks about also. So there's when they go to the Chompers.
I love that scene. Yes.
And
sorry.
she says, well, fuck that. But they had to dub it over. And so she says, like, well, screw that.
And you can
see Sigourney
it.
Weaver specifically, when she had to record that dub, she specifically made it as obvious as possible. She, like, really wanted to be like, this is fake. This is not what I actually said, as, like, a form of protest.
I love that. I love that.
And it works. It's funny. It's one of the better, like, quote-unquote jokes of the movie where you're like, oh, she did not say what.
Yeah, what
she did not say that.
Yeah.
DreamWorks kind of got in its own way, because this movie's a hit and it did really well and it got a lot of awards and got nominated for a lot of awards.
Oh, it did.
But DreamWorks kind of fucked them over. They made it hard because they insisted that it be a PG rating. It came out on Christmas.
Oh, this is not a Christmas movie.
Yeah, fully hurt the, like, chances. And they didn't really promote it a lot. They just kind of, like, they were really lackluster in the promotion.
This is just something that,
came
like,
out kind of quiet.
Bugs me. And I know it's not how the movie industry works.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things of, like, if you put all of this money, making movies is so much money, and then to be like, here's a quiet release. I'm like, what are you doing? Say it, like, it's one of those things where, like, just say that you did it. Say that you did it. Point at it. Yeah. And if it's bad, recognize that. But you have to promote it because you put thousands of billions of whatever dollars into this thing. Mm-hmm. Say it.
Yeah.
Promote it. Do it. Like, it just makes me mad. I don't know. It's becoming because it's such a theme on this show, like, they released it without promoting it. It just is like, so many people worked on this thing, and it feels so disrespectful to have zero promotion. Yeah. It feels like such a slap in the face of like, hey, thanks for making this thing for us. Fuck you.
There's such a good quote from the documentary. Daryl Mitchell, the guy who plays Tommy, he says it really well, where he says, "You made the perfect gumbo, but forgot to invite people to dinner."
Yeah.
And that's such a good analogy for it. It's the cool thing, though, and I'll put it in our list of links. I'll put it in our resources page. One of their better, I think, promotions, and something that nobody really does anymore. They had two that I really liked. So they had one where they did a promotional mockumentary that aired on E when E was still a network, and it presented it as a real show. So they were like, it was fully playing into the reality of the movie, where they were acting like Galaxy Quest, the show, was real, and had the actors playing the actors, like getting interviewed about being on the show. And then the other thing that I really like, they have a website, because this was like the beginning of the internet. It was late 90s. They're one of the earliest movies to have like their own domain name and website. Oh. But instead of having it be like a marketing website, instead of having it be like promotional, like, here's movie times, here's all of the actors, here's all this stuff. Yeah. It's like a really kind of shitty, like, HTML coded fan page.
Oh, that's so fun.
And so it's really cute. It's like the graphics are so hard to look at. It's like a crunchy little GIFs, like poorly coded HTML. And you can still find it. You can only find it through the Wayback Machine. Oh. Because it doesn't really exist anymore. Yeah. But it's so cute. And I think it plays even further into the, like, making the fans the heart of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, you said it earlier, and it was, like, the final note that I wrote down was, this movie really does feel like a love letter to nerds.
Yeah, well, and that's, like, the thing that they kept talking about in the documentary, is they're like, this was for us. This, like, we grew up watching Star Trek. We were the weirdos who were, like, watching the episodes over and over again to get our costumes completely accurate. Like, this was for us, and, like, having them be ultimately the hero. Like, if they hadn't had their nerd, they would have crashed. They wouldn't have been able to get any of this fixed.
Yeah, that ship would have exploded. Yeah. I love that whole scene with them having to get to the core reactor to do the manual. So funny.
The chompers. She's like, what does she say? She's like, this episode was badly written.
Yes. But it's such a classic kind of episode. Yeah. Like, why are these even here? Something that I thought was also kind of fun about an interesting thing that I feel like we've seen tackled in media a few times is worlds without or cultures that don't have lying or deception. Yeah. And this interesting thing of where, like, acting and lying and deception kind of sit in a sphere together. Yeah. I don't know if acting really is lying, because a lot of people, I remember being in middle school thinking, like, oh, actors are good liars. That's not necessarily true, because acting is like bringing a character to life. It's not necessarily lying or deception.
Yeah, well, and it's like how much of storytelling is lying. Like, it's so interesting to have entertainment. And he asks Matt this letter too. He's like, do you have anything on your planet that's like for entertainment, that's just storytelling? Yeah. And they don't have a concept of it. And I think it's really, I agree with you that it's a weird kind of gray zone. It's almost a question of, like, intent.
Yeah, I could see that.
Like, you're quote-unquote lying, but it's to entertain instead of to deceive. And I think that's where it gets murky, is it's like, is it technically lying if it's to tell a story or to entertain or to, like, bring forth a message? Because, like, you get into, like, fables and folklore and stuff where you're lying to children kind of, but it's to teach them morals of, like, stay out of the woods, don't trust strangers, help those in need.
I do think it's inherently human to tell stories.
Oh, absolutely. I was getting really emotional about it the other day, where I think one of the defining things that makes us human is the desire to tell stories.
Yeah. And this is such a tangent, but I liked how this movie depict how they're like, this is what entertainment is, this is what acting is, and trying to explain it.
Yeah.
And, like, this culture, the aliens not having any concept of deception, which is like, oh, that's why they've been slaughtered. Because they don't understand that they can agree to terms and then the other guy's going to still fuck them over. Like, they don't know that, which is really interesting. There was some movie that came out, like, a long, long, long time ago, where it was like, a world without lying. And I think about this a lot because I watched the first, like, 30 minutes, I think, before turning it off.
I think because it was called, like, The Invention of Lying, right?
Yes.
I watched it. It
made me mad because people were just saying what they were thinking, not necessarily lying, and this is so tangential, but...
Oh, no, it's fine.
It brings in that thing of, like, is not saying anything a lie?
See, and the thing I think about the most with that movie is, like, I agree. Not lying. The concept of making something where people don't lie, but they just constantly say whatever's on their mind, that doesn't make sense. Yeah. But the thing that stood out to me and that I still think about from that movie is he invented lying because his mother was terminally ill and was dying, and she was scared. And to make her not scared, he invented the concept of the afterlife. And so that, I get, like, that emotionally resonates with me, where it's like, we tell stories to make ourselves not afraid.
Yeah.
We make up stories that help us come to terms with aspects of our lives and being human. Like, creation myths are, like, something that I'm fascinated by, because we don't have an answer for something, but we want answers, so we're going to come up with something. And even if it's, like, crazy and outlandish, and it's like, the gods created something out of nothing, or like with Discworld, where like it's elephants on a giant turtle going through space. Like, speaking of Discworld, one of the things that, like, every other Christmas we watch The Hogfather, which is a Terry Pratchett.
Yeah.
And Death has a speech in it where he talks about, we have to teach children to believe in the silly lies so that they can believe in the big lies, like truth and justice and, like, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think that's something that kind of, I don't know, I have such big thinky thoughts about it, because it is lying, but it's not lying.
It is a hopeful form of it.
Yeah. I think it boils down to intent.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. Look at us getting philosophical on our silly movie podcast.
It's called Hanging Out with Juliana. I really do like this movie a lot. I like that scene. I think it's really interesting. The having to explain acting and them believing it to be a deception because they don't have a comprehension of storytelling.
Do you want to hear a fun fact about that scene?
Yeah.
So Steven Spielberg was on set and just kind of watching, and it was the day that they were doing that torture scene. And people still up to that point weren't really sure about Tim Allen because he's a comedy actor, whatever. Alan Rickman did not like Tim Allen.
Really?
It was like a thing.
I can believe it.
Yeah. The torture scene is like the emotional core. It is the real turning point of the movie where they really do start taking things much more seriously. And so they do this scene. Tim Allen gets, like, really emotional. Like, it's really a poignant performance. And they end, like, they cut. And Alan Rickman just goes, I think he just experienced acting. So mean. He's like, wow.
Wow, I guess you can do your job. That whole thing, oh my god,
that's so good.
I really can see Alan Rickman now being like, you don't appreciate the craft. Like, that was from his chest. He meant that. Oh my gosh.
But yeah, that's most of my research. The biggest thing about this movie is, like, it's also so different from 90s sci-fi and sci-fi movies at the time. They were, like, dark and gritty. You were getting, like, The Matrix, Event Horizon, 12 Monkeys, you were getting Alien. Like, it was dark, it was scary, it was gritty.
I haven't thought about 12 Monkeys in a long time.
I've been meaning to watch it. It's crazy. But
I think you're right. Like, this movie felt... I remember then it feeling like a breath of fresh air, and now it still feels like a breath of fresh air because it is genuinely gives a shit about its fan base and loves fans, and you feel that. There's really no joke at the expense of fans, and when somebody is being rude to the fan, it comes back to bite them. But also it felt really refreshing because, like, it's so self-aware. It's so self-aware. And that's just nice to have, man.
Well, and just aesthetically it stands out. So the production designer was this woman called Linda DeSena, and she drew inspiration from, like, Star Trek, Buck Rogers, Battlestar Galactica, like those old school. And she wanted it to have that vintage feel instead of, like, what sci-fi was looking like at the time. And I think it's interesting because it stands out to me because it's different from sci-fi in the 90s and sci-fi now. I talk about it a lot where it stood out from 90s sci-fi because sci-fi at the time was dark and gritty. And then it stands out from modern sci-fi because sci-fi now is, like, so clean and sleek.
Yeah.
And Galaxy Quest, well, it's crunchy.
Yeah.
I love crunchy, grungy. Like, he has that bit where he talks about how their spaceship was a model and their digital conveyor was Christmas lights. And that's my favorite kind of sci-fi, where a lot of it is just, like, garbage and it's cheesy. And so that's why I like it a lot too, is it's got that feel where it feels fun.
Yeah.
And kind of crunchy. Like, half of the sets came out of, like, the thrift store or the garbage.
Wait, this ship?
Their ship was a model.
No, but the ship that they do most of the stuff on, because I thought the ship...
Oh, no, it's all, like, sets and stuff. I'm being hyperbolic.
Okay, so, like, in this, the ship was really clean.
No,
and
it's clean and
it
it's
felt
nice,
real.
but
It did feel a lot like Star Wars, where you're like, I believe that this is a hallway on a ship.
Yeah.
Not like this was filmed in somebody's garage.
Yeah. Speaking of the ship and stuff, so we're veering into fun fact corner with Caitlin. They were so worried about being sued by Paramount. The production company was like, it is Star Trek, but we need to get as close to Star Trek as we can while not getting sued by Paramount. So, okay. On the ship, the name for it is, like, the NTE whatever, the, like, numbers. The NTE stands for Not the Enterprise. The thing that I really liked is, so it's shot in 3 different formats.
Oh.
So all of the vintage clips from the show are shot 1-to-1 in, like, a square format. Because in the 60s and 70s, TV was square. And so, like, it was little. And this is around the time that widescreen was coming out. So for the vintage stuff, it's shot in square. And then for Earth, it's shot in 1.85, which is, like, kind of standard. Mm-hmm. And then when they get to space and you see the big thing where he gets transported up and he sees, like, the galaxy in front of him for the first time, it switches into widescreen.
Oh.
The funny thing about that is, which, first of all, genius. I am such a slut for, like, taking into account aspect ratio for things. Mm-hmm. When the movie first came out, for, like, the first week or two, they hadn't told theaters about the aspect ratio, so the projectionists didn't know. So when it would switch to widescreen, it would be, like, on the curtains on the side of the screen. They were like, oh shit. So they had to, like, send out a message that was like, tell your projectionists that the matting needs to be wider.
Yeah. I love that scene where you see all of space just, like, in front of him. I am so mortified of space. And just, like, the opening up, like, because it is so much bigger and it gives, like, this awe inspiration, my stomach just dropped.
Oh, wow.
I was like, oh, no.
See, I like space. I don't trust the ocean. The ocean is what freaks me out, because it's too big.
So that's my...
But I know it ends, but it's also so deep.
Yeah, I don't really have... I haven't experienced a fear of the ocean. I first recognized what my fear of space was when I was in I think it was like in white sand dunes in New Mexico. And I went to go on a hike there, and the way that the hikes work there is they have posts every, I think, half mile or mile, and you just follow those posts out and then you follow them back. But sand dunes move, and they can move up to a mile in an hour.
Yeah.
So you just kind of have to be like, I think this is where.
I hate that.
And I was like, oh, this is really scary. And I was like, oh, this is the same fear I feel when I think of space. And I realized it's because it's directionless.
Okay.
You can very easily get turned around, because I was like, oh, it's the fear of not being able to figure out your direction that gets me.
Yeah.
The absolute zero touchstones.
Bringing it back around.
Sorry, yeah.
Final kind of wrap-up thoughts, like, one of my favorite things, and if you talk to people, like, all of the actors in the documentary were like, yeah, this is the best Star Trek movie. And when they were making it, the producer, he was like, we're not just making a comedy, we're making a Star Trek movie. And I think that's so funny, because they're fans of this. They love Star Trek. They love this stuff, and you can feel it.
Yeah.
And it's just, even the actors from Star Trek, they really liked it. Like, Patrick Stewart wasn't going to go see it, but then one of his co-stars from Star Trek called him and was like, no, you gotta go see this. And so he went the next weekend, and he was like, no one in there was laughing as loud and as hard as I was. This movie is fantastic.
Oh, I love that. I fully believe that too, especially some of those dumbass scenes where you're like, why is there a booby trap on the ship that's supposed to be ours? Like, oh, it's so good. I really like this movie because it walks that line of, like, being genuine and being self-aware, and I think it's a hard kind of movie to capture and to create, and they did it so absolutely perfectly.
Well, and there's so many, like, little in-jokes, and there's stuff to, like, rewatchable.
You see Gwen in the first introduction, when they first come out on stage, she does the Chevalier bow.
Oh my god!
Because it's something from Star Trek.
That's amazing.
It's a reference to, like, one species they meet once.
I love that.
And I love that. I was like, oh my god, that's the little bow thing. The, like, elbows together, hands up bow thing.
I love that.
It's so funny.
One of the little things is when they first get onto the spaceship and the aliens are in their, like, octopus forms, and they have, like, the tools and stuff, and they're going. If you look, the one alien going to investigate Gwen has a fucking speculum. Yeah, I noticed that. She's just like, whoa!
She's like, oh god.
Practical effects were all done by, of course, Industrial Light and Magic.
Oh, yeah.
So, like,
God.
practical stuff. They worked really hard to make the, like, CG look accurate to the time while still looking kind of real, which was a hard balance. Like, the Omega-13
Oh, yeah.
is, like, they wanted it to look like something that could be on the show if they had the technology for it, but still make it, like, look like it was a real thing.
Oh, that was cool.
Yeah.
The evil alien,
Such cool
what's his
makeup.
name? His
Saris.
All the evil aliens, really cool makeup.
Yeah.
But Saris's armor being his actual body.
Yeah.
Like, you see his shoulder plates, like, flare up when he gets mad, and he has the, like, little wing things.
Yeah.
And you can tell it's all practical, and it looks so good.
I am a
If it can
truther.
be practical, make it practical.
Yeah. Well, and the reason, like, so much of Marvel isn't done with practical effects is they can outsource the CG, and a lot of, like, practical effects people are unions, like,
Yeah.
union workers, and they're like, we don't want to do that.
We don't like unions.
We don't like unions.
You want fair bargaining power? Get out of here.
I love Will Wheaton because he's, like, very much, he was in Star Trek. It's kind of his thing, but he's, like, he kind of is like an Adam West now, where he just always he plays, like, Star Trek, like, nerd guys.
Yeah.
And he's in this documentary, and he said, he has this quote, and I wrote it down because it made me really emotional. Like, the last half of the documentary, like, I got really emo when they were talking about Alan Rickman, of course. Mm-hmm. But the final, like, one of the final thoughts from Will Wheaton that made me, like, genuinely emotional is they're talking about, like, this was a love letter to fans. This is so important. Like, people still dress up as these characters and go to conventions. The documentary follows a couple who, like, almost since the movie came out have been going to conventions as Thermians.
Oh my god.
And he says, being a nerd isn't about the thing you love, it's about the way you love it.
Yeah.
And that makes me so emo because it's true. And you and I always joke about it where we'll talk to people and they'll watch a show and they'll be like, oh, it was good, and move on. But like, there's such a nerd thing where you watch a show and it gets its hooks in you and you're like, oh, no. Like, holy shit.
You're like, this is about to become a personality.
This is about to become a problem for me and everyone else.
Mm-hmm. And it's also like a really unique feeling, I think, when that happens.
Yeah.
When you watch a show and at first you're like, oh, this is good. Oh, this is cool. And then something will happen. You're like, oh no,
Ruh-roh.
I need to know everything about this now.
Well, and then it like you find yourself thinking about it later or like wanting to interact with it in a way.
That's the thing, it's the interaction. I think that's a really big way of putting that.
I'll have to find it. There's this graph that someone made on Tumblr about like there's the fandom space where it's this very specific criteria. There's very specific, like the fandom zone is like you're getting just enough from the material, but like there's still stuff that doesn't like hit right, and so you want to interact with it and you want to create for it and you want to talk about it.
Yeah.
The analogy that someone used is like, because if something's really good, people love it and they get really into it, but there's nothing to add to it. And so the analogy they used is how like barnacles and like coral can't grow on plastic because it's too smooth. And so I think that's something with fandom where you see it and you're like, I can contribute to this. I can like be part of this. And I think that's so important. And like with Star Trek and Star Wars, I think a big part of it is like the inherent silliness and the inherent like almost clumsiness. Like you brought that up when we watched Buckaroo Banzai, where you were like, I miss when movies could be clumsy. I love obsessive fans. There's a story I read somewhere where this girl, she's like one of the first cosplayers to like go to cons and stuff, and she made a flight suit for Star Wars, and she went, because it wasn't on VHS, like you couldn't just go, she went to the theater and would watch it every single weekend with like a little notebook and like a little tiny flashlight and a pen to get her screen accurate, like down to the writing on the vest, like full costume, put it all together herself. Like,
that's incredible.
Fans are insane. I mean, fandom is so crazy. Like, you have like, it's so fascinating to me. Like, I love it so much. It makes me so happy.
Yeah, it's a place for people to contribute.
Yeah.
And tell their own stories.
Yeah.
It's inherently human.
Fandom to me is like so important too because it's a community. Like, there's a community aspect. I mean, the conventions and stuff.
But also, like, fandoms, I don't know, they do feel a lot like home spaces, and cons are really important because then you finally get to see a lot of those people in person, because I think a lot of fandom stuff is online. Like, I loved going to the NADPOD show because I don't know that many people that actually listen. Like, in my day-to-day life, I know like one person who sometimes listens. Being in a room of people that also dressed up and also gave a shit about this community was felt so like almost relieving to be like, someone else cares this deeply about something.
Well, remember we walked in and like I had my like half-assed cosplay, but there was that girl who had made like beaded bracelets that had the character names and stuff and was just handing them out to people.
It was really fun.
Or I went to Rose City Comic Con dressed up as Taco from the Adventure Zone.
Fun.
And that was my first interaction with a con. That was my first time ever trying to cosplay, and it was one of those things where it was like, it's kind of a niche thing. I didn't know anybody in real life who listened to the Adventure Zone, so I went and I was like, I spent a lot of time and like money on this outfit. I don't know if anyone's gonna recognize me at all. So many people came up and were like, oh my god, I love your costume. Oh my god, look at this. And like, you get that community where it's like, other people are just as into this as me. It's not just like me and my laptop.
Yeah. And that's the nice thing about cons. I do think the thing that's funny about the con in Galaxy Quest is that it's not very crowded.
Yeah, it's very small.
It's small and there's like empty seats.
Yeah.
Which I was like, this is when cons were like that. Like, my dad went to the first Comic-Con back when it was called something else. Mm-hmm. And he remembers walking around and being like, oh, cool. He's like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
No idea what it was going to become. He's like, I went because it was a Star Trek convention. He's
Yeah.
like, I just wanted to see other Star Trek fans.
Oh my gosh, I should take you to Sinister Creature Con because it's like, it's something so magical about seeing a bunch of freaks in one room.
I love it. I love that. That's why I love, like, when we go to screenings and stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's just a bunch of people who care about a thing sitting together. I think we've missed those spaces, and that's why fandoms have become stronger, is the failure of the third space in the U.S., and so when fans finally have a space to get together, it feels really, really powerful.
When I get so cheesy about it, for my friend's book, we were talking about queer horror, which is the show that my friend does in Portland. It sounds so cheesy, but I see it kind of as my church, because it's a bunch of people who are just as passionate about this thing, all in a room together, celebrating this thing, and it's such a sense of community, and I get so emo about it.
But that's where we should wrap it up.
That's our final thoughts. This was
Go join a fandom.
Yeah, go join a fandom.
If you're not a part of a fandom, pick one and do it. It's great.
Final thoughts, final quotes.
Final quotes. I'm just going to say final knowledge, wisdom from this is never give up, never surrender.
Oh, man. All right. Well, our next movie is going to be Hamlet 2. It's a Caitlin pick. The G's were group efforts.
They were
G
group
for
picks.
group effort.
Yeah.
We're getting back to, individual choices. So next week is Hamlet 2. Go listen to it. Or don't. I'm not your dad. You can follow us on Instagram at okay_butlisten.
Please rate and subscribe and follow. It really helps our numbers go up. And if you want more information about our research, we have a resource page that can tell you where we got all of our info from.
Yeah. It's linked. There's a link in our bio on Instagram. There's also we can put a link in the show notes.
Yeah.
So go check that out. It's a lot of fun. It's for Caitlin stuff. It's mostly behind the scenes or silly goofy videos.
Yeah, it's mostly interview videos with actors. So if you just want a full playlist of your favorite actors talking about your favorite movies they've been in, go watch.
There you go. So yeah. Well, thank you so much for listening.
Thanks.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.